Welcome friends to another r/NuclearRevenge video. Today we've got a story of revenge against a father from a broken family. But first, make sure to hit those like and subscribe buttons down below so you never miss any of my daily videos. That said, our first story of the day is I got my stepdad in jail. Here's how I busted my stepdad to the cops and made him go to jail. My big brother and I used to live with my mom before he left for college, and we were a happy family. Though my mom and I would argue sometimes, but my brother always stepped in and ensured conflicts were resolved before they spiraled into something huge. When my brother moved out, my mom and I didn't have any serious issues until she started to date this weird-looking guy. When she told me about him, I felt uncomfortable and I couldn't exactly place why I felt that way. I hadn't met him, but something about him already rubbed me off the wrong way. When I did meet him, he made me even more uncomfortable. I hated him from the moment I saw him. I just did not trust his face. I told my mom about the weird feeling I got when I met him, but she waved it off. She accused me of being childish and selfish. I felt mad at her too for not trusting my judgment and shoving aside my fears. She kept reiterating that I was a selfish kid who didn't care about her happiness. I called my brother to talk about what had happened. She listened to him and he listens to me. I thought that perhaps he would understand how I felt, but he didn't either. He said, "Look, mom has needs. You can't just throw tantrums because she's dating someone." I was hurt that he would say that, but I tried not to show it. I don't care if she's dating. I want her to be happy. I just don't trust him. I realized just how silly what I was saying was because I had no proof that the guy was shady or even a bad person. It was just a feeling. He said, "You don't even know this guy. Mom's been dating him for months, and she said she trusts him. Let's just trust mom to make the right decisions." My brother encouraged me to get to know the man and give him a chance. I agreed, but I still had my doubts about him. My suspicion got worse when he proposed to my mom. Certainly things were going too fast, and I was annoyed that my mom was too head over heels in love with this man to see it. Surprisingly, my brother was excited about it too, and oblivious to how suspiciously fast things were moving. I asked my brother if he didn't think things were moving too fast, and he said he didn't. He said sometimes you just know when someone's right for you, and that you want to spend the rest of your lives together. I wasn't fooled though. I wondered if the guy was after my mom's money. She didn't have a lot, but she had enough to take good care of herself and her sons. He probably was some hobosexual looking for a woman to move in with. I shared this with my mom and she laughed. She said he had a barber shop and was quite comfortable. She had insisted he moved in with us because she didn't want to put me through the stress of changing homes. "You need to stop being unnecessarily suspicious. I know it's hard for you to accept that we have an addition to our family, but he's a great guy." I decided then to relax and just let things unfold. The first month of living together was not so bad, though I could not help noticing that he didn't like me too. Could not even help showing it. My mom was mostly home that month, and she tried all she could to ensure we talked and had a good relationship. The next month, she had to resume work again. My mom's an air hostess, so she was away from home on most weekdays. My stepdad started doing weird things like spending a lot of time in the garage, and he would have strange-looking men over in the house, and they would go to the garage and not come out till much later. When my mom came home that weekend, I told her about my stepdad's weird-looking friends and his strange business in the garage. She confronted him about it, and he denied ever having friends over. He even picked up a fight about it and accused her of not trusting him and believing me over him. My mom believed him and apologized for accusing him. She then came to my room later that night and asked why I would lie to her about her husband. I was annoyed that she would believe I would just make up a lie about him, and I yelled at her. She got angry and grounded me. It was a lonely, long weekend for me, and she insisted on keeping me grounded until I apologized to her creepy husband. I refused to apologize, but eventually did when I saw that she was serious about grounding me until I apologized. My stepdad smiled good-naturedly and accepted my apology. I almost punched him in the face, and I caught him smiling smugly. Naturally, my mom and I started to have problems. She was disappointed that I would go as far as making things up about her husband, and I let her know that I was disappointed in her for not believing me. My mom and I had issues in the past, and it was always something about my grades, not cleaning my room or doing other chores, and staying up late to play video games too. I had never been caught in a lie, so I did not understand why she would just believe her husband over me and insist I was lying about it. The week after that, I returned early from school because I'd planned to rummage through the garage and see what comes of my search. I suspected my stepdad had something hidden there. I was correct. In a large box that looked like a toolbox were packs and packs of whitish substance in transparent plastic bags. I knew from years of watching movies that it was some sort of drug, but I didn't know what. I carefully closed the toolbox and left the garage. That weekend, when my mom was home, I called her aside and told her that I'd found out her husband had drugs in the garage. I don't know if he sells it, but I think he does. The volume of drugs in that box could never be for personal consumption. That explains why he had those weird guys in the garage, I explained. My mom was furious, and I was glad that she finally understood what I was talking about. She went straight to her bedroom and confronted him about it. She made it clear that there was no way she was letting that slide, as she did not want any bad influence around her son. My stepdad denied ever having drugs in the garage or bringing guys over to the garage. I rolled my eyes. The evidence was right there in his fake toolbox, and all we had to do was go check it out. My mom and I followed him to the garage, and she ordered me to show her the giant box filled with the substance. I looked around, but the toolbox wasn't there. I found it in some other position. He had moved the box to a different part of the garage. I smiled and opened the box, but there were no drugs in it, just tools. I turned back and saw disappointment written all over my mom's face. "He moved it," I exclaimed. "Where did you keep all those drugs?" I asked in frustration, standing before him and pointing my fingers at him. He was a lot larger than I was, but I wasn't scared. "You better get your kid," he said, ignoring me and turning to my mother. "There's no way I'm dealing with some hallucinating child accusing me of a crime." "Do you know how serious these allegations are?" my mom asked quietly. "Mom, I swear I saw them. They were right inside the box. White powdery stuff in transparent bags of different sizes." My mom spread her palms all over her face, and my stepdad started to say something, but she cut him off and asked him to excuse us so we could talk. "Do you hate him that much?" she asked. "What? No, Mom, this isn't about hating anyone. I did see all those things I said I did. Your hate for this man is making you do things you normally would not do. I know you to be many things, but you're not a liar." I say, "Exactly, isn't that why you should believe me?" She says, "You need to stop. All these need to stop. It's bad enough that we have to deal with your attitude and being disrespectful, but lying about stuff is unacceptable. I'm grounding you for the whole of this week. Take time to think about your silly actions." I was angry. "Freak you," I screamed. She says, "Okay, we'll make that 2 weeks." She walks out of the garage. I sat on the toolbox and cried. At that point, I was starting to wonder if I did see my stepdad and his toolbox made of drugs. I was so sure that I did, and that he was only messing with my mind. When I got out of the garage, I saw that my stepdad had packed a suitcase and was leaving. He appeared to have just argued with my mom. "Call me when you're ready to be married," he said to her before leaving with his suitcase. After he shut the door, my mom shot me a dirty look and went out after him. For the whole week, my mom avoided and refused to speak to me. When she did, she only spoke in monosyllables. She was not happy that her husband had left, and she was mad at me for being the reason he left. I did want my stepdad out of our home and out of our lives, but not in that way. I wanted a situation where my mom would be glad to see him leave. I didn't want her to feel sad and resentful toward me. They must have extensively talked about it, and my mom made sure he was pacified because my stepdad returned home much later. Interestingly, he never confronted me or anything, not even when I was home alone with him. But he had that smug look on his face that told me that he certainly knew what he was doing. I resolved to make my investigations and see what he was on about. A girl I liked in school owned a car, so I asked if she could drive me around and help in stalking my stepdad. She thought it would be fun and agreed. After school, we drove to my stepdad's barber shop. It didn't look like any funny business was going on. She laughed when I said this. "Well, if your stepdad's doing anything funny, it would certainly not look like it. It's not like he's going to have drug dealer boldly written on the door." We waited for a while, and I saw the men I'd seen in my home come out of the barber shop. They looked around suspiciously when they came out, and then they walked away from the shop in different directions. I took pictures of them before they went their separate ways. That's certainly suspicious, she said. I needed to take pictures of these men next time, but that's not sufficient to convince my mom that he has some shady business going on. She says that's true, plus it's a barber shop. What are you gonna tell your mom? That you saw men coming out of a men's barber shop? I felt defeated. I was convinced that my stepdad was doing something wrong, but there was no way to prove it. She says, how about you go to the police? I shook my head. I don't want trouble. Plus, if my mom doesn't believe me, the police wouldn't either. They say, not if you work closely with one. Listen, my uncle's a cop and he lives in our guest house. I could help speak to him. I told her I was going to think about it and get back to her. I didn't want to at the time because I didn't want to get my mom in trouble. I imagined that the police may search our home, find something, and arrest her. I, however, changed my mind when I got home that day. My mom was standing at the door looking angrier than I had ever seen her. She started to yell at me as soon as I got closer. I didn't even know what was going on. I found these on your table, she said, holding up a small plastic bag with red and yellow pills. What? Those aren't mine, I screamed. I didn't even know what those were, just that they were drugs. Her husband was behind her, grinning and making faces at me. He must have kept them there to set me up and make me look bad before my mom. Is this why you've been making scenarios in your head? Who sold these to you? I ran to my room and shut the door. My stepdad had crossed the line and I was ready to expose him. I texted my girl pal that I was ready to talk to her uncle and deleted the text right after. My mom was outside my room still yelling. She had to travel for work the next day after, so she barely got the time to berate me about doing drugs. My friend and I met up with her cop uncle, and he had me answer some questions. After which, he showed me some pictures of some men and asked if I recognized them. I recognized one of the men. I had seen him among the men who came to my house before I found the toolbox of drugs, and he appeared in the pictures we took when we went snooping around. Her uncle explained that the man in question was known to be working for a wanted drug lord in another state. He likely had no direct connection to the drug lord, but my stepdad probably did. He assured me that my identity will be protected and collected the pictures we took of the man in front of the barber shop. My brother visited and we were hanging out at a coffee shop when my mom called him. It turned out that the cops had gone to search the barber shop, found evidence against my stepdad, and were now at the house searching. We hurried home and met a police officer reading my stepdad his Miranda rights while my mom looked on teary-eyed. Eventually, my mom and brother apologized for not believing me. My mom was heartbroken and couldn't bring herself to attend his trials, so she let her friend and my brother go instead. My stepdad was offered a deal by the prosecutor's office. He was to testify against the wanted drug lord and plead guilty in exchange for a much lesser sentence. And he took the deal. I never revealed to my mom that I exposed her now ex-husband. I didn't tell my brother either. It remained a secret between me and my girl pal, who is now my girlfriend. Well, in OP's case, at least there was somebody out there looking out for him. Do you guys think that OP was very lucky how it all went down? Like as in, if OP waited maybe another week, do you think their lives might have been almost destroyed by this guy? Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. And our final story of the day is my father's mistake. I've never kept it a secret that I come from a broken family. While I may not scream it out in the streets, those who are close to me know that I'm a huge advocate for helping people in abusive situations get out of it. For the context of the story, I'm a 27-year-old male and I have 3 sisters, Molly, 25, Britt, 23, and Liz, 21. These are all obviously fake names, but these are the real ages of my sisters. There's also some mention of domestic abuse, so if you're triggered by that, maybe avoid the story altogether. We were all born into the average white father, we'll call him Bob, Latina mother household. And the first 10 years of my life were spent protecting my younger sisters from my father's wrath. He used to be a good-natured man who cared for his family and friends until he lost a really huge contract and decided instantly that his wife was the sole reason for it. She tried to be a better wife to him, cleaning up after him and spending hours cooking different things with the hopes that he would at least enjoy one of them, but Bob was heck bent on making her life harder. In the beginning, he never really hit her or us. She always made sure that we were out of the way while he just talked down on her repeatedly, throwing things around and messing up the entire house. As the first child, it's always been my job to protect my siblings, and so that's what I did. While mom and dad fought it out in the living room, I stayed with my sisters, telling them stories and pretending like nothing too serious was going on downstairs. After the fights, my father would usually go out and get drunk, and I would be given the task of cleaning up whatever damages had been made to the house. As a kid, I can't begin to tell you how damaging it was to see your mother sobbing her eyes out and being unable to do anything about it. During this time, there would still be some good days. Sometimes Bob would suggest going out to dinner as a family or having a movie night, and we would all jump at the idea because no one wanted to upset him. With time, he stopped offering these fun activities as much, until he just never did it again. On my mother's birthday, I think I was about 12 years old at the time, my siblings and I baked her a cake and used most of our saved up allowance to order takeout from her favorite place. She was pleasantly surprised and we were having a pretty good evening until Bob returned from work. That was the first time he laid his hands on her in front of us, under the drunken claim that she was cheating on him and her new boyfriend was the one who got her the cake and food. I was unable to get my sisters out of there in time, and we all watched in horror as he beat her up until she literally passed out. It was an unspoken rule between my siblings and I from then on to protect our mother. We tried to convince her to get a divorce or leave, and she always threw the "who will pay your bills if I leave" question at us. One day, Bob beat up Molly for accidentally breaking a plate while doing the dishes. The rest of us tried to stop him, but given that he's a fully grown man against 3 preteens and a toddler, it was unfortunately an added advantage. He even broke my nose. It was after that our mother decided to take our advice and get the heck out. Asking for a divorce was out of the question because Bob was a predator at this point. So one night, she had us pack our belongings, took her car, and ran away. We couch hopped at a few of her friends' places for some months until we were able to find an abandoned trailer that was selling for next to nothing. With a little fixing up and some TLC, Mom sold off her car and we made the van into our home. There was a little public school in the area, so we also just enrolled there. For the first few months, we survived on food stamps and the charity of Mom's friends. In the midst of all this chaos, I turned 13 and got a job at a local fast food restaurant to help Mom out. My sisters were very good, and even though they were so young, they understood that things were hard, and they knew how to behave accordingly. It was a really rough couple of years, but soon enough, we were comfortable enough to rent our own place and live a little better. I was almost 17 when Bob found us again. We had no idea how he did it, because the friends that housed Mom completely understood the situation and swore to keep their mouths shut. I honestly even thought that he'd forgotten about us until he showed up to the new place in the middle of the night, crying and begging our mother to take him back. He was hysterical, and it took a lot of work to calm him down until the morning. When we were able to gather around to talk, Bob apologized to us all for the pain, claiming that he'd spent the past years in agony just looking for us. My sisters and I didn't believe a word of what he said. After all, Molly and I still had the scars from the day he beat us up all those years ago. But for some reason, my mother decided that she liked the idea of giving him a second chance. I decided never to call him Dad again, instead choosing to go by his name, Bob, and my mother nearly had an aneurysm at the thought of it and insisted that I call him Dad. Most of this took place around the time that I had to leave for college. I got a scholarship, so I was worried about leaving my mother and sisters at the mercy of the man who used to be our abuser. I observed things until I was somewhat assured that my sisters could protect themselves and our mother before finally going off to college. It was a gradual process, but Bob started to be a jerk to my mother again, usually when everyone else was away, because he knew that she would keep it away from us so she wouldn't worry us. 2 whole years passed before anyone picked up on Bob's abusive ways. He got smarter too and ran off with a chunk of her money before I could return from college in time to teach him a good lesson. None of us blamed our mother though, because we understood that being a single mother was extremely difficult. And no matter how well behaved we were, she was still going to need the support of another person. With this knowledge, we started to set her up on dates with people who we made sure to investigate closely. It was quite the adventure to witness, but what mattered was that she was having a good time. By the time I was rounding up college, two of my little sisters, Molly and Britt, were already in college, and Liz was in high school. We had a great dynamic, save for the occasional squabble here and there. And for the first time in a while, it felt like we were truly happy as a family. It didn't surprise me when one day my sisters and I showed up to the house to find Bob sitting on the couch, looking frazzled with his head hung low. I was about to charge when my mother asked me to take a second to just hear him out. It was a cycle that would just repeat itself, I knew, but I listened anyway. Bob apologized for being a bad husband and parent, succeeded in bringing back all of the bitter memories that we had managed to bury. Of course, none of us, besides my mother, bought the story, and we asked for proof that he really had changed. Apparently, he was a recovering addict, and the money he stole last time he was around was to settle a loan shark that was after his life. He went on about how it made him realize that he had a good thing in the form of a family and had spent his whole life ruining it. He said a lot of other things, but I zoned out because listening to him speak was actually making me feel things that I didn't want to feel. Plus, for the first time in his life, he sounded very genuine, and it was uncomfortable to hear that kind of tone on a man that you associated bad things with. By the end of his speech, my mother was in tears, begging us to accept and forgive our father. I let him know that I was watching him closely because I had no trust in him around my family. And I told my mother that I definitely wasn't calling him dad this time. By now, I was done with college and had a job in an apartment really close to home so that I could keep my eyes on my mother and sisters. They weren't comfortable with Bob being around, but our mother was so joyful that there was no way we could say anything to her about her prodigal husband. He didn't start screwing up right away because he knew our eyes were watching him very closely. He did things like buy flowers and random gifts for my sisters under the pretext of wanting to make up for all the years he was away. Even Liz, who was the youngest, wasn't falling for his tricks. It felt like Bob had put a shield over my mother's eyes, because somehow it felt like a war that we'd been fighting with her against the man who was supposed to be our father. Now it seemed like they were a team, and we were just fighting against a happy home. Many times we had arguments that ended in her telling me how I didn't want her to finally be happy with her family. Somehow Bob had convinced her that we were the enemy and that he was the good guy. It got so bad that I stopped visiting for a while and decided to stay at my own place. Naturally, my sisters also came over to mine more often, leaving our mom alone with our dad. That was really our first mistake, because she would never tell us if Bob was hurting her, because she wanted to save face. Because of how upset we were with her, we also didn't check in with her for a little while. Nobody really noticed anything until the day Molly snuck in while both parents were supposed to be at work, to pick up a change of clothes and borrow some things without Mom's permission. The entire house was quiet until she went by Mom's bedroom, only to find it wide open with Bob hooking up with a woman that she didn't know. Molly was a bit of a klutz, and she got caught while attempting to get some video footage. She was able to escape back to my apartment and showed me what she had. Later that night, I invited my mother over to my place and attempted to have one last conversation with her about Bob. She confessed to me that she actually knew about it and he had just hit her into silence. She also told me that he always told her that we, her kids, would leave her and he would be the only one around. It made sense to me that he was the one who instigated the arguments that we had since he came around. The knowledge that he had laid hands on my mother enraged me, and I made a plan with my friends who dressed up as thugs and kidnapped Bob to a warehouse that I rented for a few hours. I let all of my rage from over the years fly, beating him up until he could barely breathe. When I was satisfied with how bloodied and bruised he was, I let him know that he was no longer a part of our lives. Of course, I also asked him to expect divorce papers and a restraining order from the family. There was no way that he would go to the police because I had evidence that he still did drugs and was involved in some fraud. That alone was very incriminating for his already soiled reputation, and he just had to agree with me. I haven't set my eyes on Bob after that day. Neither have I spoken to my family about what exactly I did to Bob to get him to finally leave us alone. But I'm glad that I was able to teach him a lesson, even if it took me so long. While what OP did here, I would say isn't the morally right thing to do, I think it's pretty easy to say that considering all the years of things Bob has done, they deserved exactly what they got. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. If you want to hear another absolutely crazy revenge story, click on that left video. Or if you missed my latest video, check out the one on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.